Today we have Dr. Ellise LaMotte as part of our virtual series, Building Inclusive Communities. And this is hosted by the New England Graduate Women in Science and Engineering, which is a group of, a collection of GWiSE groups from universities across New England that aim to celebrate and uplift women and gender minorities in STEM fields. So our mission is to increase gender representation in STEM, create fairer workplace environments, and aid with things like mentorship and support. We also try to do some advocacy at both university and governmental levels. And the current virtual series is Advocating for Ourselves and Others. Previous speakers we've had this year were Prasha Butra and Deja Knight, and upcoming are today's event with Dr. Ellise LaMotte, and also later in the month, a Picture a Scientist screening and an inter-school discussion about all the things that we've talked about this semester in December. And so if you're interested in coming to our Picture a Scientist screening, which is about gender representation in STEM, please feel free to sign up at the registration link that we sent out via the newsletter, and we'll also send follow-up information about that as well in case you missed the newsletter, and that will be anytime between November 27th and November 29th. So thanks so much, Ellise. I will pass it off to you.
Thank you so very much. I'm just going to share my screen, so bear with me for a moment. I can't see, there it is right there, I think. All right, so, okay, there we are. So hello, everyone. Hopefully you're having a good Friday. I always like when Fridays come around now these days. Everyone is so busy, but thank you for joining us today. Again, my name is Dr. Ellise LaMotte, and I am the director for the Center for STEM Diversity at Tufts University. And just a little bit about myself. I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering technology from Northeastern University, and went back to Northeastern when I started working in telecommunications to obtain my master's in business, thinking I wanted to stay in the business space. But as time went on, I decided that that's not what I wanted to do. So through self-exploration, working in telecom, real estate, a nonprofit organization, I landed in higher education and knew that's where I wanted to be. And in knowing that, I went back to school to obtain my doctorate in education because I wanted to really excel in that space. And being that I lived through my STEM experience and not necessarily having a good experience during that time, I wanted to work with and support students who are underrepresented in the STEM space. And that's why I am doing what I do now, which is being the director for the Center for STEM Diversity. So my obsessions in life, my family and friends, the picture behind me is my daughter and I. We are ziplining over Niagara Falls in Canada a couple of years ago, and it was a blast. I love that kind of stuff. Dancing, just loving life in general. And again, like I said before, supporting underrepresented students who are in STEM. So what I wanted to talk to you all about today is being able to advocate for yourself and your community. And I just took, a dictionary definition of to advocate. So to speak or write in favor of, support or urge by argument or recommend publicly. And so just, taking a few seconds to think about what that really means and then how you can apply that to yourself is what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. So we're going to hop right into breakout sessions in a few moments to talk about, advocating. I really wanted this session to be one where you all could share your experiences, good and or bad, in ways that you've advocated for yourself. And then I wanted to share some of the ways that I think advocating for yourself can work. But before we go into breakout sessions, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, one way that I advocate for my Center for STEM Diversity. So I think it's very important to create networks in order for you to be able to advocate for yourself and the things that are important to you. So one thing that I do to create this space for myself and for my center is I meet with my manager once a week, and I get to control the agenda. And in doing that, I make sure that he is aware of all the work that we're doing in the center. And there are 3 people who are in the center right now, myself and 2 other people who run other programs within the center. So I make sure that he knows what we are doing. I make sure that he knows what we've created, accomplished, the challenges that we've had, etc. And as I'm doing this with him, he's getting to know, how we work, what's important for us, what's important for our center and our students, what challenges we're having, so that when he is in rooms that I'm not in, he can advocate for me. So, I didn't necessarily start our relationship out with saying, hey, Chris, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. It was showing him that we are committed to this center, and then building that relationship and that trust, such that when the time comes when we need assistance or I need some advice, etc., I can, go to him, and vice versa. I also want to make sure that I am there to support, that he knows that I am there to support him as well. And that to me is how you can build, advocacy partners, if you will, so that, you can be able to advocate for yourself when the time comes. So that's one example that I'll use, for you, that I use on a daily basis, or actually on a weekly basis when I meet with him. And there are others, but we'll talk about some of those later when we come back. So what I want you all to do right now, and I think Emily is going to put you all into random breakout sessions for about 10 minutes. And I want you all to think about ways you've advocated for yourself, some that have worked and some that have not worked. And then why didn't those work? And I'm hoping that you all can kind of cross-pollinate ideas. And we're going to come back and talk about those in about 10 minutes. So now, are there any questions before we move into our breakout sessions? I think there's going to be about 4 people or so to a breakout. Hopefully everybody will get a chance to participate in the conversation. All right, if no questions, and Emily, I'm going to let you drive and ship folks into rooms. And I'm going to probably be popping into rooms too as time permits. So that won't surprise you if you see my smiling face.
All right.
All right, enjoy that. See you in 10. We're back. All right, so hopefully you all had some enlightening conversations. I was in room 2. I thought I was going to be able to move around, but I was only able to go back and forth to room 2. So sorry I didn't get to visit the other rooms. We'll try to figure that out for the next one to see if I can pop into other rooms. But before I talk about some of the things that I would recommend you thinking about considering in reference to advocating, does anyone like to share some things that they do to advocate for themselves, some things that went wrong, how'd you rectify them, some things that went right? Anybody?
So I guess I'll just speak generally for our group.
All right, excellent.
Yeah, we talked about, I would say mostly like how to communicate when you're advocating for yourself. So trying to overcome the feelings of, feeling like no one, like people want to hear what you have to say. Overcoming the idea that you should never disagree with superiors. And then a specific strategy of asking questions rather than saying, statements like, I need this, or I don't know exactly. But yeah, asking questions to try and engage with people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And particularly if you don't understand, if you don't agree, you can ask questions, so I don't understand, or can you explain that again? Or, so things to kind of have a dialogue might be helpful. And I think we were talking in group 2 about, how do you approach someone if you have, a complaint, and you want to advocate for yourself in that space. And, and one suggestion that I would say there is, making sure that you have built a relationship with that person first. And I'm not saying you have to have known them for 10 years, but, making sure you have some kind of a relationship where there's, a little bit of trust there, so that when you're giving feedback or saying, I don't agree with you, that there's a relationship that you can build that on. Because I think if you don't have that relationship, then, you not agreeing and or feeling like, you've been slighted, et cetera, is not going to go over well, because they're going to take it in a negative fashion, and that's hopefully not the way you're trying to deliver it. So, if there are people that you work with, your faculty advisors, people in your lab, et cetera, who you consider to be your superior, and if you have to be in their space a lot, I would encourage you. And if you don't have a relationship with them, I would encourage you to say, can we meet once a week? Okay, I'm too busy. Okay, how about once a month? For 15 minutes even, just to say, how's your day going? Well, let me tell you how my day is going. These are some of the things that I did that went well. Here are some of my challenges. And not necessarily asking them for anything or complaining, but just having conversations so they can get to know you, you can get to know them. And then when the time comes and you do need something, you have a relationship to stand on. And I know sometimes, timing does not work like that, but if you can control that best you can, that's what I would, advise you to try to do. So before there's, any mayhem, and, I want to get to meet, Roya, she's been in the lab. Sorry, they have been in the lab for, a year. I'm new in the lab. So, I'm going to see if I can, spend some time, with them, just to say, can you tell me about, being in the lab? Can you show me around? Who should I get to meet? Who shouldn't I get to meet? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the ways you can advocate. That things you shouldn't do is, walk up to Jason and go, hey, Jason, you're in the lab. You've been here for 10 years. I need so-and-so. That's not the way you want to advocate. Even if you do need so-and-so, you need to, again, get to know Jason. And also when you advocate, you don't want to always advocate and just say, I want, I need. You want to, it's a two-way street. You want someone to help you. You should also be expected to help them when and if they come and ask. And even if they don't come and ask, you should always say to them every once in a while, well, Abby, do you need anything? Can I help you do something? Because again, that's how you're building the relationship. And Abby might be in a room that I'm not in, and she might say, well, Ellise likes to do, I don't know, ABC, and we need that. So let's bring her into this project. And again, I would not have known about that project if I didn't talk to Abby and she didn't know what I liked, et cetera. So these are the ways that you advocate. And I think networking is a important part of advocating. Okay, so what other topics came up in other rooms? Because I can talk all day long, so I'm going to stop and let you all say something.
There was an interesting note that came up in our discussion room about how to deliver information. So someone was talking about how it worked well in their relationship if they sort of put information forward in a coherent and sort of cogent way that worked for what their advisor, with what their advisor liked to listen to and what their advisor understood. So focusing on one idea and building it up rather than doing maybe what they were excited about, which would be throwing out a lot of random ideas. And so I thought that was really cool, this sort of focus on what does your listener care about? What does your listener value in a discussion?
Nope, agreed, definitely agreed. And another thing that I'll add with that, I think it's important for you, if you have these meetings with people formally or informally, particularly if they're important to you, is either A, have an agenda, or B, write some minutes. And the minutes don't have to be formal. It can just be in an email back to them. Thank you for your conversation. Here are some of the things that we talked about. Here are some of the commitments that I made. Here's some of the commitments you made. Here are some timeline, just so that it's there, because people are busy. People have a lot of commitments. They're going to forget things. You're going to forget things. So if you have it written down, then that's a nice other way to kind of, hold each other accountable, particularly if you're all acting as accountability partners for each other, et cetera. So I would say write things down. When I go back to my example with my manager, all my agendas are written. They're sent, a day or two in advance. And I keep that to jog my memory of the things that we've accomplished over the year. And he does the same thing. And he can go back to reference it, when he's in those other rooms that I'm not in, et cetera. So I would always say, keep notes for things that you are particularly interested in when you are talking about them to other people. All right, what else came about in the rooms? I think we've heard from 2 rooms. And what was the 3rd room? What did you all talk about?
I can talk about that broadly. So we talked a little bit about gender-based differences in methods of self-advocacy. And one thing that came up was the idea of if you're advocating to do something or for an idea, sometimes as women, it can be harder for us to advocate for ourselves personally, whereas advocating for our good ideas or like reframing that might help kind of get over some of that imposter syndrome. And then we also talked a little bit about what didn't work. And so one of the things that came up kind of at the end that doesn't work is just working super, super hard and expecting to get noticed for your efforts.
Exactly. You know, and again, you know, to your point, you have to be or get comfortable tooting your own horn. You know, you don't want to walk in a room tooting your horn, you know, all the time, but you have to be comfortable in doing that. And you have to get comfortable in asking for what you need and want so you can be successful. And I know it's hard, you know, because, you know, we walk around with the imposter syndrome and microaggressions and all those other terminologies that I think everyone knows about. But I want you all to really know that you are worthy to be where you are. You know, if you weren't, you wouldn't be there. So you should walk in the room knowing that I've been invited to be in this room, or I've created this opportunity for me to be in this room. Therefore, I should be here. And you're still going to have that little voice in your head saying, you know, you're not worthy. Tell it to shut up. Just tell it to quiet down and keep on moving ahead, because life is definitely too short. You know, when I am in situations where, you know, I'm nervous or afraid or whatever, I just dare myself to do it. You know, so I'm going to say, you know, so find what your thing is going to be. So my thing is daring myself to do things. And I like dare, so I take them. And then when I'm done with whatever that activity was, I'm like, you know what? That was not that bad. It was great. I made some contacts, or I, you know, did whatever the activity was. So I would just find out, you know, if you want to dare yourself, you want to take that idea, take it. But just know that you belong here. You know, if you don't remember anything else I say today, remember that Ellise said, you belong here. And you're going to succeed at whatever you want to succeed at, even when you're at your darkest day. And we're going to have those, right? We're all going to have those. When I was writing my dissertation, and I was an engineering student, you know, writing was not my thing. You know, so here I am having to write these papers, and I'm going, I'm not going to be able to do this. And my cohort members were all, you know, people who had masters in education and education and English. So they were writers right off the bat. I had to learn that skill very quickly. And I felt like I was, you know, the last one in the class to catch up. And I was, but the fact remains, I did it. You know, was it hard? Yes, it was hard. Were there days that I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be able to finish this thing? Yes, there were, but I did it. So you all can do whatever you all are setting your mind to do. So like I said, if you don't remember anything else I say today, remember that, because it's real. If you need me to remind you every once in a while, send me an email. I'll talk to you again about it, because it is real, definitely real. So that, like I said, if you don't remember anything else I say, remember that. All right, so if we don't have anything else to add on advocating for yourself, we're going to do a similar activity. You know, what are ways you can advocate for others? You know, if you see a student, colleague of yours who might be quiet or shy, and, you know, they need assistance in advocating, you know, how might you go about helping them? If there's a community, a larger community in your institution that you want to advocate for, how do you go about doing that? Actually, but before we do that, hold on one second. I do want to share, I'm just going to share my screen one more time quickly before we go off into the next breakout. I just want to share some thoughts about advocating for yourself. And we've kind of touched on some of these things, right? But, you know, meeting faculty members who you might be interested in talking with. And it doesn't matter that they are not or are your faculty advisor. You know, if you're interested in, I don't know, biomedical engineering, and somebody at another institution is doing some fabulous work, reach out to them, email them, find out if your faculty member knows who they are so you can get an introduction. And just ask them if they can spend 15 minutes with you talking about, you know, what your interests are and theirs. And for the most part, faculty members and people in general like to talk about what they love. Faculty members love their research for the most part, so they're going to want to hopefully talk to you about that. So use that, to your advantage. And then the more important thing about that is, if they reach back out to you and make a connection, don't waste it. Make sure you are being consistent with every once in a while dropping them an email, seeing how they're doing, telling them how you're doing. Hey, in my lab today, I just did X, because again, it's going to relate to what they love to do. And again, you're going to be building this relationship whereby this faculty member could be an advocate for you one day. And you might be able to be an advocate for them one day. And like I always say, this is a two-way street. It's not selfish one way. I'm going to get what I can get from you. It's always a two-way street. So be consistent, if they begin to want to create a relationship with you. And you can develop these relationships with faculty, advisors, peers, etc. So take advantage of the people who are around you, or the ones that you want to get to know. And like I said before, be consistent and be politely persistent. Faculty members are busy, so you might email somebody the first time, they don't get back to you. Email them again. There's one faculty member that I work with, he's out of University of California, he happens to be on our advisory board, and he tells me, he goes, okay, you need to email me 3 times before I respond, because I get 500 emails a day. And he does. But if you are persistent, he will get back to you. So again, be persistent. So other things that I thought, you might want to think about in advocating for yourself. Develop or participate in some accountability partnership groups. You're advocating for yourself because you want to do, these certain things. Well, it might be useful for you to have an accountability partner. You set goals with each other and you hold each other accountable. They might be able to advocate for you in one shape or form, and vice versa. That's one way to kind of continue the advocacy. Developing a motivation plan. What motivates you, to accomplish these goals that you're setting? And again, these are things that you can share with people who you are creating the relationships with that could advocate for you in the future. And then just, following through with that motivation plan. Okay, how are you going to reach those goals? Get some commitments. And then once you reach some of those commitments and milestones, reward yourself. Don't just continue to grind, because the grind gets tiring. Reward yourself, and reward yourself with whatever makes you happy. A run, in New Hampshire, a hike in New Hampshire, ice cream, whatever it is. Make sure you're rewarding yourself as you're going through this process. And I think, again, it's important to understand, like someone said, you being successful and churning out, research and doing whatever you need to do in your classroom is not going to be the only thing that's going to help you to be successful. You can't do it in a vacuum. So again, you need these advocates, these accountability partners, etc., for you to continue to be successful. And in doing that, find others who are like-minded, who have similar goals. They don't have to be the exact same goals, but similar goals to you. They have the same work ethic. I mean, it could be totally 2 different subject matters, but they have the same work ethic as you do. They want to reach similar goals as you. So you can then work together, advocate for each other, be accountable for each other's actions as you're trying to, get your goals created and developed and implemented, etc. So those are some other things that I would offer up as you are trying to figure out how you want to advocate for yourself. So before we go to advocating for our communities, any comments or questions about things that I put forth? Okay, I guess that means no. All right, so we are going to get into breakout groups again. They're going to be randomized, so hopefully you will meet some other people in these rooms. Excuse me. And we're going to talk about a little broader topic, but on the same wavelength. What are ways that you advocate for your community? And you can even start by telling people what your community is, what that means to you. And you can have several communities that you want to advocate for. So what are those? What are ways in which you have advocated or want to advocate? What worked, what didn't work? And again, I'm hoping that these conversations are sparking some ideas in others on ways that they can advocate for themselves and others. Okay, any questions there? 10 minutes goes by so fast. I got to 2 rooms this time. So that was good. I'll try again on the third time. So there were some interesting conversations going on in the 2 rooms that I was able to join. So please share what some of the advocacy activities are or were that worked for you or didn't work so much for you.
I can talk a little bit about what our group talked about.
Thank you, Abby.
Yeah, no problem. So I guess one of the things that we talked about that didn't work was being sort of confrontational about things that you're advocating for a group, because that can usually lead to like poor relationships with whoever you're advocating to. And also phrasing things as more of like a question or a discussion or something, or just getting people to sort of think about something instead of being like, you need to do this. So that's something that we talked about as being a good strategy to advocating for a group.
I mean, that to me makes so much sense. You know, I am an advisor for a high school group in my town, and you know, we advocate for these students, and sometimes it gets frustrating because you're saying or asking for the same things over and over and over again. So after a while, you know, the polite asking of questions is kind of out of the window, because now, you know, you're frustrated, but you still want to keep that relationship. So then it gets to be, you know, challenging as to what the strategy is going to be so that you can, you know, actually move the conversation. But starting out, you know, asking questions and just trying to be inquisitive to try to move the conversation is important. But sometimes it doesn't work, you know, and then you have to kind of get to the more pointed statement of this is what we need in order for things to get done. And I think it's important for people to understand or know when you have to switch. You know, I think in one of the groups that I talked in or listened in, talked about a union having a conversation with administration versus others having conversations with administration, and usually, excuse me, conversations with unions are more combative. That's just kind of, unfortunately, the way they operate sometimes. And that seemed to have worked for them, but does it always work is the question, and when do you use it and when don't you use it? So, you know, things to kind of think about, you know, as you are moving through this advocacy conversation with varying people, particularly when it's in administration and you're trying to advocate for a community. What other thoughts, as my tongue is getting tied, what other thoughts came up in some of the other rooms?
In our group, we did sort of talk about the different roles people play in talking to administrations as well, and how sometimes if it's harder to do things on your own than if you do get a group together on behalf of people, and you know what you can contribute to that group. And again, when you're asking, when you know directly what to ask for and the power that you have in asking for it, that's very important. You know, like one grad student writing an email to the department head isn't actually going to get much for the department. But if you have a group of students who together want something and they're able to ask for something specifically, and that motivates the department head to talk to people, that can make a much bigger change. So you need to get the community involved.
Nope, that definitely makes sense. So what I want to do is share some things that I've thought about, and it kind of touches on, you know, what you all were saying. So you talked already about, you know, areas in which need support, and some people talked about their GWiSE organizations. Some people talked about their departments because they were small and needed resources, et cetera. And then I think, you know, rather than just, you know, starting a conversation with administration or whomever you need to advocate in front of, and before you do that, you know, what's your strategy? And making sure you have a strategy. You know, how do you want to approach them? What do you want to get out of the conversation, et cetera? It's important for you to know what that is before you enter into the conversation. And also determine who your allies are. So, you know, grad students, if you have one grad student who is is advocating for, sick leave for their fellow grad students, you can't do that by yourself. And you might not even be able to do it with other grad students. So how do you develop a relationship with faculty members or staff or administration who can be an ally for you and for your cause? Because that will then, give you some power, if you will, in the conversation, because you will have an ally who can, again, sit in that room where you necessarily can't sit to have those conversations. So, making sure you have those allies, and then making sure they understand what your strategy is and what your situation is and what your goals are. So something else to think about. So other things for advocating for communities, developing peer-to-peer mentoring groups, and that's not necessarily mentoring as far as on an individual level, but getting these groups together where you can perhaps one-on-one mentor each other, but then having a common goal can then move forward and advocate for that particular group when and if needed. Same thing with faculty to peer mentoring groups and or circles. If you have a group of faculty members who are supporting you and other students, that again can be some allies you can use when you need to advocate for something. Alumni organizations and alumni in your particular department or area are also people that you can use as advocates. So again, I think about how do you reach out to alumni who graduated from your department or with your major, et cetera, and how they can assist you. And then just think, oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go there or there. Let's go back. And then, if there are areas focused on diversity, inclusion, and equity that you are trying to work on, making sure that you are including faculty, staff, and your peers in those conversations to make sure that all the constituencies are being heard. And I think too, when you're trying to change a community, a mindset, trying to advocate for a community, finding leaders who are willing to be your change agent, and finding out who they are. And then, like we said before, developing a relationship with them so that they can actually be that person and be the champion for whatever you are advocating for at that particular point in time. So, for me, it always, again, goes back to networking and relationships and planning. I'll add planning into that conversation as well, in reference to being a good advocator, if you will. Any questions or comments about some of those strategies or things to think about and consider? And those can really, help you whether you're advocating for your community or for self. Any comments or thoughts? No? Okay, so now in the interest of time, so we are at 11:29 and we were supposed to stop at 11:30. I had one more activity because I really want you all to walk away with knowing a little bit more about each other. And we were going to have a quick 10-minute networking breakout session. And in this breakout session, we wanted you all to talk about, if you had a network partner, what might you want from that particular person? And if you had a network partner, what could you offer this particular person? And then if you were willing, we have a Google Doc. We wanted you to write those things down or type those things out. I'm interested in someone who can help me practice presentation skills. Here's my email address. And then Teresa might say, well, you know what? I'm an expert presenter, so I'm going to help Ellise with her presentation skills. And we wanted to kind of create this document that I think is going to live in the GWiSE space, because they want to then build on this networking activity so that more and more of you can cross-pollinate and assist each other and then build your networks, particularly if you are in different institutions, because you're not going to necessarily see each other all the time. But this is, again, how you build your network. So I wanted to leave with that, but I'm going to ask the question, do you all have another 10, 12 minutes to do that activity? Okay, all right, great. So we're only going to split up in groups of 2. We figured that we want there to be 2 groups. There, I think, yeah, so me out of it, so 15 of you in the room. So we'll have one with 7, one with 8, and just really talk about, you know, what you might want in a networking partner, and then fill out the form as you see fit, and then we'll come back and wrap it up quickly. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes. So Emily, if you can. Julia, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. My information is out there, so please feel free to contact me if you'd like to. Thank you. All right, so we are joining 2 rooms right now, so let's go.
Just kidding.
Okay, I think everyone's back. So in the interest of time, we won't do another readout, if you will, because it's 11:42 and I do want to be conscious of people's time commitments, et cetera. But I believe that the moderators in the rooms were taking notes on the Google Doc, and other folks might have also been contributing to that Google Doc, but I do know that the GWiSE organization is going to begin to grow this networking circle, I'll call it, activity. So, you know, keep in contact with them in reference to that, particularly if you had offered up some assistance and or wanted some assistance. I don't know if Molly or Emily or Michelle wants to add anything more about that, but I'm just going to quickly share my screen for a few more minutes, and then we will bid each other adieu. All right, so I just wanted to give you all this list of other STEM organizations that you may or may not be familiar with, and I'm sure there are others as well that are out there, but you know, other advocacy groups that are there to create research and networking opportunities, et cetera, for people in varying STEM fields. If I forgot one that's near and dear to you, sorry, I just tried to pull as many as I was able to find. So that's there for your review. And also I found at 4 other institutions, and I'm sure there are others, some more formal programs that focus on women in particular and students who are underrepresented in STEM. So if you want to get ideas about advocating or mentoring or networking or whatever, you might want to just kind of see what some of these institutions are doing around those kind of activities. So I wanted to give that to you all also to take a look at your leisure. We took care of this particular one last thing, which was a networking activity. Hopefully you made a connection. I know it was quick, but hopefully you all will continue that process. And finally, I just wanted to say thank you. I know we only had an hour, you know, it was in a Zoom box, but I enjoyed speaking with you all, and I hope that you were able to at least glean, you know, 1 or 2 things out of this activity that you will take and use that will be useful for you. And my information is on the slideshow. You can always find me at Tufts University if you ever want to reach out. If you want to, you know, I don't know, ask my opinion about something, want some advice, etc., I'm here. So feel free to reach out to me. You know, the network definitely works, and I want to help as many people as I can. My tagline is kind of world domination, and in that I mean I want to support as many students as I can support, you know, in the community that I appreciate, which is the STEM community. So again, thank you very much for your time, and have a good rest of the day. Have a good weekend. Hopefully it won't rain tomorrow, even though it's going to be cold in New Hampshire. Enjoy your hike, whoever was hiking in New Hampshire, et cetera, et cetera. Any other last parting words before we hang up?
I just wanted to thank you so much for your time being here. And then I mentioned this in the group, but yeah, we would like to continue the networking doc. So if you're not on our mailing list, make sure to go and do that so you can learn about what we're doing with that, the networking circle. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today.
Thank you very much, everybody. Be safe. Wear those masks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Jason, it was
Bye-bye.
great seeing you.